What was the most screwed up thing you saw at your school? Not saw, but I did experience the aftermath. A kid at our school died once, while out on a school camp. They were way out in the Australian outback. The teachers made barbecue for the kids, and one of the boys, for some reason, ate the food, kebabs, without asking what was in them, even though his parents had filled out his permission form indicating clearly that he had food allergies. Long story short, hardcore anaphylaxis. Throat swelled shut, fell to the ground, foaming. School nurse stabbed him with every single EpiPen they had in the medical kit. Nothing. Nada. Zip. Fuck all happened. Picked him up, threw him in the van, and sped out of the campsite at top speed down the road. They were so far out in the middle of nowhere that there's no phone reception. Can't do anything. Can't call for an ambulance, helicopter, nothing. Finally got to the nearest town, called emergency services. Helicopter arrived, loaded the kid onto it, started treatment, flew straight back to town. Never made it. Dead before the chopper landed. I was working at the school at the time. I had a job offered by the school to graduates, which I accepted, and found out all the details from the school nurse. The bullied kid, other than myself, absolutely losing his goddamn mind, and beating the hell out of his bully. There was blood everywhere, mostly on the kid. He was punching, he was kicking, he was slamming his head against a bench, he bit part of his ear off. No lying, he almost killed him. Broke several ribs, several fingers, his ankle, jaw. Apparently he had a ton of mental health issues, and deliberately stopped taking his meds just so he was unhinged enough to do that to the bully. People talked about it for years after it happened. A buddy of mine became a teacher there. It still apparently gets mentioned. It's like a folktale, over 18 years later. What happened to the bully and Mike Tyson? Two things. I saw a girl bite another girl's nipple off in a fight. I also walked into a bathroom while a mentally disabled kid was peeing at the urinal with his pants around his ankles and freestyle rapping. That made my nipples hurt just reading that. Some kids were punching a mason jar lid that we used to seal a jar with some bug in it. They were doing it as some sort of who's tougher test. When the teacher sees this and sees they have small scratches on their knuckles, she proceeds to tell them that the big was poisonous and they will die very soon since they drew blood punching the lid. We were maybe 10 at the time. She made them write goodbye notes to their parents and make goodbye speeches to class. We were all tripping because we believed her too. It was wild. In grade 2, my teacher made all students step on a child as they walked into class because he left his lunchbox on the steps in front of the class. This child was mixed race, and this was in the 80s and in apartheid South Africa. Those who refused got hit with a cane for not listening to their teacher. Supremely messed up, and I will never forget it. She was fired a year or two later for various messed up things. A teenager got onto high school roof and jumped off to his death. According to the story, he was being sexually abused by the principal and making the teenager's life a living hell. The other teachers knew about what was happening, but nobody said anything or helped him. Bright and early in the morning as many kids are arriving to school. Pretty popular guy comes running through the crowd, chased by a group of 3 other dudes. A little bit of space opens up for them to run through, but all of a sudden one of the chasers stops, pulls out a gun, and fires 3 right into his back. Murdered, right in front of a significant chunk of students. Very sad day. A new kid at our school grabbed the art teacher's scissors and threw them over a dividing wall when the teacher left the room. They hit some girl in a different art class on the other side and one of the blades went through her cheek. We were held after class until he finally confessed, and we saw the police at the school later. He had been at our school for about a week, and we never saw him again after that day. My gym teacher also taught health education. He would sit at the front of the class in his mesh shorts and no boxes and teach us about sex education. His Johnson would sometimes be visible. We had a class of 40 boys and 6 girls, and apparently us girls were pretty naive cause we all brushed it off as an repetitive accident. In hindsight, as an adult, that bastard was showing his Johnson to teenagers on purpose and we were all too dumb and scared to realize. He was real handsy in gym too. It's not the worst story but still super gross. I also had a PE teacher that was way too handsy with some of the girls, 14 to 15 at the time. A kid tried to kill himself by jumping off the bridge in the school, and it was only like a 25-foot drop, so it didn't work and everyone laughed at him. He killed himself a few years after graduation. Sad face. At an assembly in the auditorium there was some kind of raffle. The kid who won was gay. Maybe one out of the 5 or so openly gay kids in my school of 500+ students. All of those kids were bullied and made fun of for being gay. Anyway, when they called his name and he came up on stage, it seemed like practically the entire auditorium was booing him. He went up, grabbed whatever it was he won and flipped the middle finger to everybody in the room. He got suspended for that. This would have been around 08-09. Some dude threw a chair in the head of another student, then beat the living shit out of him. Also, some guy got a concussion because someone threw a kiwi, fruit, and he got hit in the head. Some guy in college sat in front of me in a studio. We were on stools, so there was no back to the chair. He had his phone in his back pocket, screen facing out with rough porn playing on his phone. He had his headphones on. I wasn't the only one who noticed, but I certainly didn't want to break the silence by telling him. Was in computer class and the dude next to me, who was a big Bible thumper, was masturbating into his Bible. He got suspended for a week. A week later walked into the library and he was in there crying while masturbating into his Bible again. In 1981 I was in grade 4 and we had a sadistic teacher. She'd beat us for any reason. The worst I saw were 2 incidents. The first was when she caned a boy on his palm. She thrashed his hand until the skin broke and blood gushed out. The second was when she called a boy up to the blackboard to solve a maths problems. Poor boy was so terrified he froze. She grabbed him by the neck and smashed his head against the blackboard several times. She regularly did this to him and eventually he ended up in hospital with a serious concussion. She taught there for many years and no one ever did anything about her. This was in South Africa, and back then teachers were considered untouchable by most parents. If you came home complaining that a teacher hit you, you'd probably get another thrashing because the teacher was always right. She's dead by now, and I hope she's burning in the deepest reaches of hell. Oh man, so it wasn't just me. When I was in school in South Africa, our teacher would throw cricket balls at us if we were talking too loud. Thankfully everyone knew to duck and he never hit anyone. A friend's sister drowned because her mother was on her smartphone and didn't keep an eye on her. Someone else tried to suicide by jumping. Another kid was beating everyone and had anger problems. Turned out his parents beat him at home and calmed him down by force feeding him alcohol beverages. 2 people getting some action in the disabled bathroom stall and someone filming it and spreading it around the school. The girl tried to kill herself after. When I was a seniors, I went to one of the trashiest schools in my state. Some real redneck pride kinda stuff. There were 2 freshmen, total boners, but they were tough shit, apparently. I remember it was the day before homecoming. They lured one of the special education kids into the boys' restroom and barricaded the door. They proceeded to beat the ever-living shit out of this kid and take pictures of each other, forcing a barely conscious far-spectrum autistic kid to fillet them. This part one didn't see. Of course, what I did witness was after school. I got benched in football for smoking weed, so coach made me help coach freshmen so I wouldn't feel left out or useless. The freshmen practiced on a different field that got a great view of the parking lot. The victim had already been taken away and the 2 other kids were being questioned at the school. This was probably an hour after school let out. An officer came out within off the attackers and was walking him across the pavilion. From the other side, another person, huge dude, got out of their car and started walking towards the officer and then one attacker. When they finally cross paths, the huge guy gets one hit at the kid, knocking him down immediately, then dropped another first while the kid was flat against the concrete. Turned out the big guy was the autistic kid's dad and nobody ever saw the one attacker again. There were a couple rumors spreading. Some said the kid was killed by the second punch and other people were saying that impact scrambled his brains. The other attacker I couldn't tell you. Nobody cared enough about him to start any rumors or spread any news. The ambulance in front of the school because 2 guys glued their eyelids shut with a quick dry adhesive. Someone used a deer carcass to tie the front doors together so no one could get in the school. Oh dear. I had a psych professor who just disappeared in the middle of the semester. We came to class and someone new walked in and said they were asked to sub for us that day, but they had no idea why. Ended up subbing the rest of the semester. Turns out some students who followed his Instagram saw that he had finally proposed to his girlfriend of like 10 years, and they presumably just up and left together. He was always telling us about how he'd been wanting to do it but didn't have the guts to. So kind of weird, but I guess it turned out okay for everyone and we were all just proud of him. Once saw a teacher fully dump out a teenage girl's bag because he was convinced she stole one of his pens. Exposing her pads, tampons, phone, hairbrush, etc. Also her diary, which some random kid picked up and started reading out loud while laughing. Exposing her life at home where her mum and dad are mentally abusive towards her. All the kids made fun of her and the teacher was just screaming her about a freaking pen. She ran out and about 20 minutes later the teacher found the pen under his papers. She transferred schools. Some dude filled up a used toilet with like 100 photos of Fat Albert. I told my friends when I got back and one by one they all went to the bathroom and came back laughing. Good times. There was a kid I knew, IDK how or why, or if it was his dad's or grandpa, but the fucker brought a grenade to school to show me. It was when we were leaving school. Guy just opens his backpack and lets me take a look, and sure enough it was there. The EMTs wheeling out the Spanish teacher after she had died in the girls' bathroom of a heart attack. Primary school. Boys' bathroom. Poop everywhere. Floor, toilets, urinals, sinks, walls, mirrors, doors, air blowers, ceilings, lights, and trash can. It looked like a group effort. So much poop. Sounds like that bathroom's at Kmart. When I was in college, there was a bomb scare. FBI was called on campus and everything. I still had a chemistry lab get to, even though the building in which the class was located was directly next to a building which had been evacuated and firmly behind the yellow police tape. There was a stream of students passing this police tape and entering a back door, held open by a tar, to this building for classes. I joined the line and went to class. To this day I cannot fathom what I or anyone else was thinking in that moment. We had a shooting because a kid was bullied so bad by popular football players. About a week after going back to school, the same bullies were right back at it. Admin did nothing to stop them and did nothing to address why the shooting happened. At my high school there was this stairwell that people would go fool around in. It got to the point where it was called BJ Corner. Almost 30 years later my son goes to that school. I made a joke to him about staying away from the seaside stairs near the cafeteria and he said, "You mean BJ Corner?" They put cameras in because of that. Cut to me with surprised Pikachu face. Saw this kid go absolutely mental over a call in an in-school football match so bad he grabbed one of the other player's arms and snapped his forearm over his knee. Bone was sticking out of his skin and everything. Back in 3rd grade, 1997, a classmate of mine was acting out. I'm not sure if our teacher was in a bad mood or this was accepted behavior back in the day, but he made the troubled student come up the front of the classroom. He then grabbed this kid by neck, pinned him against the wall, and proceeded to lift him up off the ground as high as he could. I don't remember exactly what was said, but I do remember our teacher saying, "I could kill you if I wanted to, but not today," as he dropped him. I attended a boarding school in Nigeria where the older boys bullied the younger boys on a nightly basis. They would come and take one boy, strap him to a pole like a deer and carry him down to their dorm. The boys were more terrified of being taken than they were of what was actually going to happen. Once at their dorm, they would torment the poor kid for hours, but it was mostly stupid stuff, not any real physical harm. Nonetheless, many of the kids that came out of that school were seriously fucked up. A sexual assault happened in the lunchroom and the principal swept it under the rug and tried to cover it up. Then there were about 3 riots in the school. Everything got put under control at an assembly. She didn't admit to sweeping it under the rug. In fact, she didn't even acknowledge it happened even though it was brought to her attention. She just paid attention to the riots, disregarding their meaning, and no, the girl who was assaulted never got any justice. I think she transferred schools. I didn't witness this, but some kid in my high school did some John Wick shit and stabbed a kid with a pencil over a vape pen. Some guy the first would casually say hi to and make small talk decided to one day show me the inside of his backpack, and it was a big-ass combat knife. The guidance counselor's daughter getting options and privileges the rest of the students in the school didn't. In middle school, our classes got called off for an impromptu assembly. The cause? The vice principal's son had a band, and they wanted an audience. So class was postponed, for our whole grade, to go watch them perform a bunch of barely recognizable alt-rock covers in the cafeteria. When I was at 1 to 2 grades, we had this extremely friendly janitor, who could be found in his small office, and he would close the door and give you some candies. I heard about this, and never believed my friends, but I decided to go see him on one of the breaks. I know what you think, but stay with me. I knocked, he opened and asked me what my name was, and what I would like to do when I grow up. He gave me 2 candies and said thank you for visiting. Yep, just a normal dude who likes kids. Also, we had computer class where we were taught stuff like Paint, Word, PowerPoint. We had about 20 Pentium 1 computers. One day, all the computers were gone, disappeared. And so was he, the candy-giving nice dude. What a strange fellow. A student got killed in a hazing ritual. Well-connected parents of the ones in a position that could have prevented it are doing everything to keep it quiet. One of my classmates tapped me on the shoulder and flashed at me under the desk, multiple times. He is now in prison for killing his baby. Last year, a kid fell on concrete face first and got a concussion when trying to jump over a bench. That kid was me.